Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm confused. We just did a Buckeye Weekly Podcast like 3 hours ago, and there's another one coming tomorrow. It's raining Buckeye Weeklies this week.
Yeah, it is. And we've got Kevin Noon down here as well because we are live.
On the ones and twos.
I would say zeros and ones. It's
true.
Yeah, he's on the computer. Kevin, there's a show going on. Yeah. Okay. Just making sure you knew. But, yeah, we are here. Just finished up with interviews following Ohio State's practice today. Tom, one thing I noticed from watching players walk around after practice was that Jackson Smith-Njigba had a hoodie and also had his helmet, which makes me think that he was practicing, but also maybe he wasn't, so that's why he had the headgear on, to keep himself warm out there because he wasn't practicing.
Yes. So there are two possibilities based on what we heard tonight. One is that Jackson Smith-Njigba practiced today, is going to play on Saturday. This is pretty much a foregone conclusion, barring some kind of significant future setback. Number two is Ohio State is running an incredible psyop in which all the players talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba as if it is inevitable he will play on Saturday, and really psych out Iowa, which, you got to figure whether or not Ohio State has Jackson Smith-Njigba going to make a huge difference with the Iowa offense out there. So I'm going to guess, Tony, I think this is one of these Occam's razor situations where the simplest explanation is probably the best, and simplest explanation is, yes, Tony, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to play on Saturday.
I don't know. I think you got to pull all of the tricks out when it's Iowa week. You've got to make everything, you got to make Iowa think everything is possible. But I do agree. I do think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to play. Marvin Harrison had a comment about that when asked, "Hey, what's a defensive coordinator supposed to do once everybody you got all of the receivers out there?" What did he have to say?
I don't know if this is exact quote unquote, but it was pretty darn close. He said, "I don't know what you do as a defensive coordinator facing us with Jackson Smith-Njigba. You just have to, you just sort of have to pick one and pray." And that's one of those things where it's like, ooh, that's a little spicy. That's also like, I don't know that there's any defensive coordinator who'd be like, no, that's not true. This will be fun. Everyone's having fun. We're having fun. CJ Stroud did on that front. CJ Stroud, no one fears us and we don't fear anybody. No one walks in and says, quote, Ohio State is going to bomb us. They come in and they plan to compete. Like everyone, and he said, if you're a competitor, you're not coming in here going, well, this is going to be bad. But, it's also kind of deep down, like defensive coordinators know, like this is going to be on the more challenging end of the spectrum of opponents we'll face this fall.
Yeah, players may come in thinking they're going to win. The coaches don't necessarily think that. Like, we're going to do everything we can to try not to lose by 1,000. But there are clearly some coaches who have known that they're going to lose many games over the years, and you try to convince the players that no, you've got a shot.
Well, there is only so far that a defensive game plan that involves the phrase "and then a miracle happened." There's only so far that goes, and you have seen crazy upsets over the years, and this is one of these weeks where you look at this week and it's like, wow, there's not very many good games this week. Oh, this is a week where you're gonna have a million crazy upsets. Okay, cool. The one thing that I think Ohio State fans, if they are leaning towards being concerned about, hey, what if something insane happens? There has been a lot of talk about the 2017 game. And, we were talking, and I think there are 3 guys who are still on the team who were on that 2017 team, which would be Jerron Cage, Bradley Robinson, and Mitch Rossi I think we decided were the 3 guys who would have been on that 2017 team. So it's not like there's a lot, and none of those guys would have probably made that travel roster. So it's not like there's a lot of guys who were there that day and remember that day, but I'm sure they remember the aftermath, those 3 guys. And Ryan Day remembers it. And Ryan Day, Marvin Harrison was asked, when did Ryan Day bring up the 2017 Iowa game? And he said, like, at the beginning of the bye week. Like, this has been something that they have had in their heads for quite a while. I'm sure they've probably watched a little bit of it. And, if you want to not take a team like Iowa lightly, that's a real good object lesson for you.
Yeah, that was something I asked each of the guys about, and something I asked Ronnie Hickman about, and he said, yeah, like he said the same stuff that Ryan Day said about scars. He's like, yeah, coach has scars from that. And I asked, well, you can tell by his words that obviously that hurt, but can you tell like beyond his words that game affected him? He's like, yeah, that's like he went on to explain that Day told them like Tuesday of that week, coming off that Penn State loss, they kind of knew something wasn't right. And they were, just, it was a huge win, Penn State comeback, and then you just can't get going again during the week. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that they brought it up immediately, because that week they kind of noticed it maybe too late at that point to really get things going back up. And then you start the game by throwing a pick six, and you're like, well, this was not ideal.
Yeah, and that was a game where I think that was the game where the week after that we came in here, and the big video board where it says beat Iowa right now, the big video board, they always had, Urban always did like themes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ryan just does, beat Iowa or whoever. Urban always did themes of the week. And I think the week after that was the week that it was laser focus. And that was Urban Meyer's way of saying like, okay, I don't think it was very focused in here last week. From what we heard tonight, not only all the talk of the 2017 game, but also, were you with Luke Whippler, or was that?
No,
okay, so Kevin mentioned Kevin Noon was over there with Luke Whippler. There's 3 interview tables, so we have one of us at each. Kevin was at the table where Luke Whippler was, and he said that Luke Whippler said, this is just a paraphrase, but we just had one of the best practices we've had since Luke Whippler got here. So that is a decent indication. Like, okay, focus probably isn't an issue this week.
You say laser focused, and I immediately think of a cat chasing a laser. Focused on the laser, doesn't catch anything, and ends up going up the walls. And that's exactly what happened that game. But yeah, no, that's been a popular topic, and it starts from the coaches, and the players can tell you everything about that game. And when I asked Ronnie about that, he's like, well, I mean, yeah, you could tell. Just look at the scoreboard. I imagine how I would feel seeing that scoreboard, and that's something that just sticks with you forever. So the players, it has been inculcated into them. It has been drilled into them like, hey, this can happen. It has happened. And there are some coaches on the staff who were there when it did happen. And so that's a fortunate thing when the coaches can go back and look at why they think that happened and when it happened and when it started, and just make sure that you're watching all of the signs and that you're not even allowing any of that to creep in. And so they started that very early, like you said.
Well, one of the most valuable things you can do is, learning from mistakes. What's even better than learning from mistakes is learning from someone else's mistakes. You don't have to step on the rake in order to learn the lesson that you shouldn't step on a rake. So learn from the lesson that the 2017 team taught you, and don't step on that same rake. It is interesting to me that last time it was Penn State at home, and then they go on the road to Iowa. This year, it's Iowa at home, and then who do they play on the road next week, Tony?
Penn State, yes. It's a interesting twist. So, Tom, what you're saying is a 39-36 Ohio State win against Iowa?
38-37, but yes. Yeah, and I was just looking to see if they had given up 56 points this year or 55 points this year. They have, but a lot of it has come in garbage time. But yeah, 10, 12, 21, 21, 10, 20. I mean, they have not given up half of 55 in any individual game yet this season, and I suspect they will not give up half of 55 on Saturday either. The Iowa path to victory involves either being about +6 in turnovers or somehow making Ohio State kick 5 field goals and somehow getting 8 safeties to win 16-15.
Well, yeah, and those 6 turnovers, 3 of them maybe return them to all the way, return them inside the 1. I don't know if you saw Scott Docterman's piece in The Athletic today. He's Iowa beat reporter, detailing the failures of Iowa's offense inside the 10. Like Spencer Petras has thrown it like 15 times inside the 10-yard line and completed like 7 of those passes for a couple of yards with like 1 touchdown. And it's really, really, really bad. And so that's why not even getting inside the 10 is not good enough. And getting inside the 5, inside the 2, you've got a better chance. But if Ohio State and Iowa were to spend 9 overtimes, like that would be a failure of immense proportions. Ohio State 2-point plays, because Iowa out of 9 overtimes is probably getting like 2 or 3.
Basically the same thing we saw in the Penn State
Mhm.
Illinois game last week. Yes. Do we have questions, Kevin? Have we had anything coming?
A lot of just chit chat about the game, and Troy B said the empty room really shows off that snazzy blue hoodie.
It's not a hoodie. Thank you. So the hood.
Yeah, it's not a hoodie, but it is snazzy.
It is.
And
Unless he means yours.
it is blue. No.
Gray's kind of blue. That's why they call it the Kelly Tires Blue Gray Grape. Not many people know that.
That's true. It's very true, Tom. Yeah, not anybody knows that. Nobody knows that, in fact. So we had – were you over there with C.J. Stroud at all?
I was, yes.
Did he have anything to say?
So let me run through my notes here. He said he was asked about what he did on the bye week, and pretty much everyone watched college football games. CJ said he was more interested in watching his friends play than, he was really watching in terms of just like watching his friends and enjoying it rather than watching, Tennessee or Alabama and going, how will we match it? How will we do this? He was kind of, I think, trying to kind of shut his brain off and just enjoy the football. He also talked about how basketball was his first sport, because that's been sort of a topic of conversation, being a multi-sport athlete and in terms of being, younger guys and what best prepares you to be a sort of versatile college athlete and the importance of playing a bunch of sports when you're a kid. CJ said basketball was his first love. What position do you think CJ Stroud played on the basketball court?
Point guard.
Point guard it is, yes. He said Todd Fitch, the one of the assistant quarterback coaches, talks all the time about how being a quarterback is being like a point guard. You got to distribute. You got to, but also you can fill it up yourself if you want to.
Some point guards drive and draw and dish, as Dick Vitale says. C.J. Stroud, not necessarily the driving type of point guard, though.
No. He is. He also talked about the fact he did a lot of self-scout over the week off, and he was asked, so what kind of things you'd learned. He's like, I would rather not talk about what I learned. So I guess that was one of those where someone asked the follow-up. I was like, well, you have to ask the follow-up, but he's not going to answer that. And lo and behold, he did not answer that. Julian Fleming talked about getting Jackson Smith-Njigba back and how important that would be.
Allegedly.
Again, in a hypothetical scenario where Jackson Smith-Njigba plays this weekend, just how important that would be, and how great it was to see him in practice. Again, one of the greatest psyops in history. That's my prediction.
Great to see him watching practice.
Yes. He also talked about Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, and Jaden Ballard. Just the incredible work ethic those guys have, and how that has really gotten them ready a lot sooner than they might have otherwise been ready to contribute. He said they live, eat, and breathe football. And there was a lot of talk about the wide receiver room, and Jackson Smith-Njigba was coming back. So that means there's probably fewer passes coming for guys like Julian Fleming and Emeka Ibuka and Marvin Harrison potentially. And so is that a big concern? And that has been a if one of us gets a touchdown, we all get a touchdown. That's sort of been the mantra in that room. If one of them is succeeding, they're all succeeding. And you sort of saw that with like the G. Scott touchdown at Michigan State, and just the incredible excitement that the other guys had for that. So I think that's one of those things where that's the correct answer, and that's the answer that you would expect to get at 130 programs. But it feels like they really do mean it here.
Well, and because these guys, their playing time is going to be impacted, and they're all excited to have him back. And saw Kevin Wilson talking about yesterday how excited he is to have him back because of the way he practices. And he drives everybody in practice. But I don't think this is a new thing for the receivers. We've talked in the past about receivers in 2017, 2018, all doing interviews together, sitting at the same table. And that's when there were six guys basically. But
that was really annoying when they would try and do six people sitting at the table.
Yes,
there I said it out loud. We were all thinking it. Now they don't do that anymore, which is good.
No, and it is interesting that, and it's not just the receivers. We've talked about it with Zach Harrison and JT Tuimoloau sitting at the same table answering questions where they impact each other's playing time because one guy in, the other guy's out, and none of these guys seem bothered by it. But that also goes back to, they recruit to that. You recruit all of these guys. Not all of them are going to be playing 70 snaps. They know that, but I'm excited to see Jackson Smith-Njigba back. But like I asked Ryan Day on Tuesday, how do you make sure you don't force stuff to him? And he's like, yeah, you can't do that. You have to be organic about it. And it's a nice thought, but I still think they're going to want to like just, get him involved and just shake off a little bit of rust, whet the appetite, that sort of thing. But, Iowa's going to be, once they see number 11 on the field, like they may not choose to allow that to happen.
Yeah. Well, and that it is a pick your poison, offense, which goes back to Marvin Harrison's quote from earlier. Were you the one who asked Marvin Harrison about the greatest receiver in Ohio State history? I thought he had really interesting, he sort of demurred on that a little bit, but then he went through a whole list of names. I thought there were some interesting names on that list that he discussed.
Yeah, well, he first said, I played with Chris and Garrett, and I played with Jackson, but then I was like, well, when you think about it, like who was the first name? And because he first mentioned Chris Carter earlier in the session, so he mentioned him, and then he was like, hey, well, then there's Joey Galloway. And then he's like, well, of course, Brian Hartline, Coach Hartline, got to throw him in there.
When they talk about smart players, that's what they're talking about right there.
So, yeah, he threw his coach in there. And then Tim May was asked, well, yeah, but what about who's the greatest receiver in NFL history? To which Marvin said,
we all, it's basically, we all know the answer to that. Strong implication being Jerry Rice. But I'm not sure. Yeah.
I think Randy Moss has a claim, just personally, but those guys are always good to talk to. Marvin Harrison, we see him, as he said, like, I see you guys every week. Like, well, you know what? Stop scoring all the touchdowns. We won't talk to you after the game. We won't talk to you midweek. This is basically his fault.
Yeah, really. Well, and he's an interesting guy to talk to because he will actually answer questions and give you some interesting, thoughtful answers on some things. He was asked, his work ethic has been the thing you've heard about with him since the moment he walked on campus here. And, Tim was asking him about the jugs gun, and because we'll see them, they will have the jugs gun out at the end of practice, and practice is over, and he's over there, and then some of the other receivers are over there just catching passes, and back in, this was like the KJ Hill days. This might have still been a Brian Hartline thing, but the 10,000 catches, they would try and catch 10,000 passes off the jugs gun during the summer. And I don't think I've heard people talk about that recently, but I would not doubt that Marvin Harrison has caught 10,000 passes out of the jugs gun over the course of the summer. He said, you do get sore from your hands, like your hands hurt and you just kind of have to keep working. It's not like, oh no, once you get to a certain amount of time, getting balls fired out of a jugs gun at you at 70 miles an hour doesn't hurt anymore. It's like, no, it's still, your hands just hurt all the time, but that's how you get better. And throwing, getting tennis balls shot at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, just that kind of stuff, just hand-eye coordination. That's the kind of stuff that, separates what he can do from what a lot of other people can do.
Yeah, and after practice, like every Tuesday or Wednesday when we're here after practice, Jackson Smith-Njigba is on the jugs gun. He's catching passes, and he was against Day. But Marvin Harrison was asked about his daily routine, and he's like, well, I get here early, get some treatment, then we'll go catch an hour of passes off the jugs machine, an hour or 2 or 3 hours before practice, and then, then go do the practice thing and go get more treatment and then do more, whatever. And but as he said, like, he's not the only one who does that. Talking with Ronnie Hickman, who is he's like 2 lockers down from Marvin Harrison, and so he talks with Marvin Harrison and Reese Stocksdale because they're right next to each other. And Ronnie said, like, I'll be at my locker and Marvin will come in and I'll be like, where you coming from, Marv? And Harrison will tell him, catching passes or treatment or whatever. And then as he's leaving, where are you going, Marv? And it's like, catching passes or treatment. But also he's like, and Reese Stocksdale does the same thing. And that's a walk-on guy. And we see Reese Stocksdale here catching punts all the time. It's interesting to see a midseason All-American in Marvin Harrison and a walk-on who has played 2 or 3 games this year and has a couple of targets this year doing the same thing.
Well, that I think is a pretty good indication of like how you get on the field here, because there are lots of walk-on wide receivers. Who's on the field? The guy who's doing that. There are lots of scholarship wide receivers. Who's the one who's got three touchdown games and 7 career starts? It's the guy who's doing that. And, I always go back to, I think it was the Miami game in 2019. And I was just trying to go up above where the tunnel where Ohio State runs out to get a picture, like looking down, just a little different angle on the, the same basic picture we get every single week. So, okay, I'm trying something new. And as I go up there, you go up the ramp, you walk around the corner, and you're kind of walking past the doors where the Ohio State locker room is. And there on just on the little sidewalk. They've got the jugs gun set up, and it's Brian Hartline shooting passes to KJ Hill, and it's, KJ Hill has caught literally 10,000 passes this year, and he's like, well, I'm going to sneak in another like 20, 30, whatever passes off the jugs gun before. And this is not, this is not the Michigan game. They're going to beat Miami 76-5 in like 20 minutes, and he's there catching passes off the jugs gun. Like that is the mentality, and that's why, one of many reasons why, when players post like pictures like out at dinner and people are like, why aren't you studying film right now, son? What are you doing eating food? No time to eat food. It's Indiana week. Like, I promise, these guys are putting in the work. It'll be fine.
Just listening to his schedule, I'm like, that's okay. That was 28 hours in an 8-hour span. What you just gave us. I don't know how the math works, but they've got people for that. And the immense amount of work that goes into it. When you're like one of the most talented players in the nation. But talent only gets you so far. And he's seen the work ethic he learned from his dad early on, all of the extra stuff that it takes to become a Hall of Famer, to make it, then to stay, then to be good, and then to be great. And he's following in that path. But I also think it's not just because of who his dad was. It's also because of obviously who Marvin is, but also what he sees here and what he's driven to do here greatly impacts him as well.
Well, and you have that sort of culture of these rooms. And this is not just, we talk about this in terms of the defensive line room too, and the quarterback room and the wide receiver room. There's that culture that gets handed down. And, you've got the guys who were here, Michael Thomas and Evan Spencer taught Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon what it is to be a wide receiver. And then those guys, Paris and Terry and Johnny, they taught Ben Victor and KJ Hill and Austin Mack, and then those guys, it just kind of goes on year over year. And they're bringing in 3-4 guys at that wide receiver position every year, and the young guys, now the young guys are Caleb Brown and Caleb Burton and Kojo Antwi, and I'm missing Keon Grays. I knew I was missing one. I always forget Kojo, and then I was like, oh, good, I got Kojo. Good, yes. So there we go. So yes, but you've got those guys are learning from Marvin Harrison and from Julian Fleming and Emeka Ibuka and all those guys too. So it is something that just sort of, it is a tradition, and doing it the right way. You can get. We talk about programs with bad culture, and Miami and Texas for years and years and years was a bad culture program where it was just there was a culture of entitlement. Well, you can have a positive culture too, and that's kind of what that looks like.
And he's a very humble person as well. And he was asked, did you expect to have this kind of success this early? And he said no. You think of like an LSU receiver. Did you expect to have this kind of success this early? Yes. I can't believe it took this long for me, the greatest receiver of all time, to have just this much success.
Counterpoint. What kind of crazy person would expect to have three touchdown games in their first 7 career starts? I mean,
fair. I mean, like I said, an LSU wide receiver would expect that. But
yes.
No, he's good. Anything else that you wanted to, Kevin? You got something?
I've got a couple questions here. Troy V, I can't get a good feel for this game if it's going to be a blowout or defensive grind game. Which way are you guys see it playing out?
I think like a 31-7 game is going to be very unsatisfying, but that might be the most likely answer.
Okay, I love it when we are way, way, way off in our expectation, because I was thinking about this earlier today, and the score that popped into my head was 31-6. So
6 is better.
Yeah, it just
6 is good.
It just feels like, and people will say that's really unsatisfying, but as atrocious as Iowa's offense is, Iowa's defense is really good, and this is like the good Northwestern defense or the good Wisconsin defense, where they're not the most star-studded, but they just kind of make life miserable for you, and you end up in, you can really dominate the game, but you just end up kicking a couple field goals or and you bog down, and they get one stop at midfield, and then they're doing a little bit of a slog of an offense. Would it shock me if this was 48-6? No, not really. But I think the likely bounds of what that score is somewhere in that like 31 to high 40s kind of range. I don't think they're putting up 59 points this weekend.
No, neither do I. Kevin, you got another one?
Jordan Kapler, what are OSU's chances of winning if Iowa rolls a jugs machine out on the field at quarterback?
You know, what if
Can the jugs machine catch passes too? Because
Ohio State would still – you could make C.J. Stroud all-time quarterback, and Ohio State would probably win by more because Iowa would be throwing the ball more, but they'd be throwing it like they don't have the receivers.
also it'd be hard for CJ to learn the Iowa offense in like 48 hours.
That would also help. That's why I think that changes my answer. 52-17.
Well, and I say that, and it's like as if the Iowa offense isn't like drawn up with a crayon on the back of a diner placemat. So, yeah, I don't think, I don't think Spencer Petras is fantastic. Like, I think if you put Spencer Petras in Ohio State, you would notice a difference in the Ohio State offense for sure. But Spencer Petras is also like, this is a little bit of the Sean Clifford thing where it's like, Sean Clifford is not a CJ Stroud level quarterback. Sean Clifford is also not the biggest, certainly, not the biggest problem and definitely not the only problem on that offense. And I think you've kind of got a little bit of that with Spencer Petras too, where this is not a good, you just assume this is going to be a good Iowa offensive line, and it is not. And the skill talent is not really there outside of really the tight end room.
And he's made some really good throws in the Michigan game down the seam to his tight ends. Like, he had some throws where like, that looks like an NFL quarterback. And then you have others where it's like, oh, okay. I remember now. And that's really, that's the bulk of what you'll see, but there's always that chance. Like, he has the ability to put it in tight spaces. It's just, I don't think you can go in preparing for that to happen. And they don't. Iowa does not prepare for that. They we need big, wide open spaces. And it's like, yeah, but we can't. Well, if we throw it within like 3 yards of the line of scrimmage before the defense has a chance to crash down with the safeties, and then the receiver can turn and pick up that 4th yard, now we're at 2nd and 6.
He makes those great, difficult, tight window throws just infrequently enough that Todd McShay has not projected him as a first-round draft pick yet, as he has with so many other Big Ten West quarterbacks, because 404, file not found.
2 more that we're going to take. We're here at 27 minutes. Holden Smith asking, how often do Tony and Tom watch film?
I used to watch more film than I do now. Foreign film,
Football to the groin.
Action film, football to the groin, yes. Barney's film had heart, however. Yeah.
No,
I have Ross for that.
No, yeah. And when you say film, if I'm saying film, I'll say like I watch some on YouTube. Like I will watch some of I've seen enough of Iowa. Like I've seen cross games with Michigan and that stuff. Like, so I have not watched much Iowa. I don't think I've watched any Iowa this week, but I will record a bunch of games, and then if there's like nothing going on, I'll throw one on, and that might be like a Kentucky, Mississippi State or something. But it's really hard to watch a lot of football when you cover football. I'll just be honest.
Yeah, it is, and that's because you don't watch games on Saturday, so you're doing a lot of the football that I watch. I end up watching the condensed version of games, and it's they've cut the plays down. And, you watch the Michigan, we watched the whole Michigan game for the Michigan Monday thing, but you watch the play and then you hit the L key twice to skip forward 20 seconds and then you watch the next play. And, when you really talk about watching film or grinding tape or whatever you want to call it, I feel like you kind of got to have the all 22.
You have to.
Otherwise, you're just kind of watching TV.
Football,
it's just watching football. And, when they do the coach's film room for the national championship game, I will watch that a bunch because you learn so much by having that all 22. It's just not really that easily accessible for the most part. So that, I'm not one of those people that uses the hashtag grind set and hashtag grinding film. Like, sometimes you're just watching football, and you can learn a bunch by watching football, but it's not the same as watching like actual film.
I don't always know what I'm saying.
Last one, a lighter question. Holden Smith, again, what is Tony's go-to T-Bell order?
Tony, you have $28 in your pocket.
If you just want something quick, just like 3 tacos is fine. Like, if you're not looking for a meal and you're just looking for a snack, just quick 3 tacos. But I will customize my bean and rice burrito because it's like $1.69. Then you add steak and it's like $2.69. Then you add some tomatoes, it's another 50 cents. Add some onions, you want some jalapenos in there. The key is to customize via the app. However, I'm always customizing it differently, so I don't know what my actual order is. I just know like you get a couple of burritos for like $8.
That's surprisingly insightful. I'm
Use the app, people. I've tried to tell Tom. I've tried to tell Kevin. Have they used it?
no.
I have it downloaded, but that's about it.
In fairness, I don't. This is not a Taco Bell specific issue. I just have really learned to just filter you out. It's my brain started to develop. It's a defense mechanism, really.
Apps for all of your fast food order. I'm telling you, people, so much freer food, cheaper food, and that's from me to you. Super chat that, please. But that will do it. Kevin is telling us that he wants to go home. I could stay here for another 30 minutes.
I would stay here and talk to the listeners for another 30 minutes, maybe 60. Again, hashtag grind set. But Kevin
has a 90-minute drive home, so we will let him go. Want to thank you all for tuning in on this impromptu live edition, the second Buckeye Weekly episode today, or if you're getting this tomorrow, the second one today, tomorrow.
Yeah, we have a new bold prediction show coming up on Thursday. It's go ahead and try and come up with bold predictions involving the Iowa offense. It is there's some sort of religious ceremony going on behind the camera.
I wish you could see. I wish Kevin had a camera on him just then.
Mm-hmm.
But that will do it for us here at Buckeye Weekly. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Reminder to check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Also, go ahead and like, subscribe, hit that thumbs up on this video as well at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thank you very much, and we will talk to you guys later.